To serve because our soul wants to cleave to God in love, to bond with God, and also out of respect, reverence, and awe, the presence of God, which brings to a sense of fear, of not wanting to be disconnected. And even the higher level is not the fear of not wanting to be disconnected, but of overwhelming sense of magnificence of the presence of God that leads one to a sense of awe, is all about our desire, or about us and our connection to God. And that is necessary intent, that when we study Tanya, when we study Torah, when we study or we do a mitzvah, that we need to have that mindfulness that gives two wings to the mitzvah that we're doing, that allows it to soar on high. That's the intention that is necessary. That the soul cleave to God, the soul is connected and not disconnected. But then there's something even more deeper than that, a deeper intent, which is quite a lofty one, and is based on a teaching of the sages that say that a person should never separate themselves from the community. So simple meaning is, you're living in a Jewish community, don't make yourself separate. You need to be a part of the community. That's the mitzvah, the mitzvah. Be a part of. You can't live Jewish life being on your own. You need be part of a community. That's a simple meaning. But Alter Rebbe takes this in a deeper way. That don't separate yourself from the community means the intent that you have, that when you want to unite and attach yourself to God, meaning your divine soul, it should also, in addition to that, it's not just your soul. Because where your soul, where the Jewish soul comes from, it's the source of all the souls of Israel. Right? So let's understand, what does this mean? So God creates the world with his words, his mouth as it were, right? He creates. That very same mouth also is called the Shekhinah, the divine presence. It's in Sfiros, it's Malchus, king, the king. King rules with his words, with his mouth, right? The command of the king, the word of the king is a command, right? So the Shekhinah, therefore, animates all of the worlds. But that's the external aspect of the Shekhinah, that it is the word of God, the mouth of God that animates all of creation. The inner will of God that is expressed in the Shekhinah, in the divine presence of God, is the fact that we get power, as right now I have the power to say these words, right? So God gives the power to inanimate to be, a stone to be a stone, vegetation to be vegetation, animal to be animal, and human to be human. That's all external. The internal Shekhinah, it imbues me right now with the power of speech to utter words of Torah, right? Or the power of thought, that I can think these words, or the power of action, that I can perform a particular mitzvah. Now, that Shekhinah is also at the same time the source, the inner dimension of the Shekhinah, right? The inner will of it is the source of the Jewish souls. And therefore, when I engage in Torah, my intent should be that I'm drawing down the Shekhinah from its root source, where all the Jewish souls come from, and I'm drawing it down into not just me here, but since my soul comes from the same place all Jewish souls come from, to all Jewish souls down here, all of Israel, to unite all of the Jewish people with God. So my Tanya right now, my mitzvah of prayer or charity or whatever it is, eating matzah on Pesach, right, is not merely about my union with God, but it's the union of all the souls of the Jewish people with God through my action of eating matzah, for example, right? And this is the meaning that we say, if you have the blue siddur, the Tilas Hashem Chabad siddur, blue siddur says on page 30, before we start Baruch Shamar, we say, L'shem Yechud Kudsha B'Richu Shrinton L'shem Kol Yisrael. For the sake of the union, a union we're talking about, in other words, this mitzvah we're going to do now, is for the sake of a union between Kudsha B'Richu, which means the Holy One, blessed be He, and Shekhinah, and the Divine Presence, in the name of all of Israel. In other words, my prayers now and every mitzvah that I will do henceforth throughout the day is about creating a union above between the male and female parts of the divine. That union begets new light, draws down new light through the mitzvah that I am engaged in. And where is it that light going? So previously it was about our connection to God. This deeper, more profound level is about the light that imbues all of the Jewish souls in this world. In this world. As a note, the Alter Rebbe says, in a note, he says that at the same time, this is a concept that we've learned previously, a few lessons ago, that through creating that union above, you bring now a new light into the divine attributes, and in the divine attributes where there may be some severity, some kind of judgment upon myself or others, you sweeten the severities by bringing chesed to overpower the gvura, by bringing the divine kindness above, that it overpowers the judgment that comes from gvura, from strength, the divine strength, and it sweetens it. And when it comes down with that light down here that imbues all of the souls down here, Jewish souls, it brings a sweetening of severities. That was a note. Sort of, I wouldn't say parenthetical is the right word, but Now, the Alter Rebbe asks on this, right, that, in other words, this is a very lofty level of intent of where you're coming from. And in order that this should be sincere, that our heart should truly desire this higher union, you need to have a avarabba, like a magnanimous, great love of God alone. In other words, what you're doing is gratifying to God alone and not for the purpose of quenching the thirst of your soul. It's powerful. Think about it. What we spoke about previously about the love and awe of God is really a in a sense self-directed. My soul has a thirst, and I want to quench that thirst, to have a bond and attachment with God and not to be disconnected. So that's quenching your thirst for God, which is it's fantastic. It's amazing. However, It's still about me. This level is far beyond that. In other words, the intent of doing the mitzvah is for the sake of all Bnei Israel, of the Jewish people, for their benefit, right? Which is something that's gratifying to God for Him. And that's a very lofty level. This is likened to a child who strives to do for their father and mother, whom he loves more than his own being, his own body and soul. So this seemingly is a very lofty level. Now, the Rebbe says, nevertheless, every person should habituate themselves with this intent. So even though it may not be really where your heart is, your heart might be just with your desire that you want to be connected. Yes, it's a tall order. But Elder Rebbe is saying we should habituate ourselves to at least think this way, to think about this, even though we are not truly living this. In other words, living it in our heart. Because the truth is, it is genuine. What's it genuine? Because the inborn love that the soul has is as such. It's just that we're not conscious of it. We're not living that. But we are that in the soul. So the fact that we be mindful of this is genuine to the soul's natural love for God. So therefore, it is absolute and utter truth, because the natural love of that's hidden in the Jewish soul is to cleave to God, not to be parted or to be sundered or separated from Him for a moment, even at the cost of life. That's the nature of the soul. And therefore, if we are engaging in Torah studies now, or prayer, or any mitzvah, it's also this surrender of the soul. And think about it. When you think this, before learning Tanya, for example, what are you doing? You're not thinking about your bodily needs. You're just thinking about being united with God, to give Him divine gratification, and to bring a light that imbues everyone. That's amazing. Now, our soul kind of experiences a glimmer of that in the Garden of Eden, right? Because they're immersed there with the divine light, so they're delighting in the apprehension and the absorption of the light of God. And here we don't experience that, but that's what's happening. So, Elder Rebbe says, we say in the morning, the blessing Elokai Neshama, which means, my God, the soul that you've given and placed in me is pure, you breathe it into me, and eventually you're going to take it from me. So, God gave me my soul. He will eventually take my soul. So, it's really His. Therefore, all I have then, in the interim, called life, here, down here, is therefore handed over my soul to you, to unite with you, to your oneness. To you, God, I lift my soul, binding my thought with your thought, my speech with your speech. And that's what it means when we say a blessing. Baruch Ata, blessed are you. In other words, we're addressing directly God. right? Binding my thought with your thought. We're directly connecting. And this is what we're left, is to just give ourselves over totally. In other words, in total devotion, not even to quench the thirst of my soul, because then that's a devotion to me, to fill my needs. And that's a very lofty, level itself, that I have a thirst in my soul and I want to quench that. And so be it that everybody, had that. That would be amazing. But yet, it's still self-directed. And again, I don't want to minimize it. It's phenomenal. But here, it's giving a very tall order. Yes, absolutely. Tall order of what we're capable, only because it's the nature of the soul that it has that. So he says, habituate yourself. In other words, to be aware that about giving myself over, not because, for two reasons mentioned here. One is that through the mitzvah, we bring a light into the general community of the Jewish people. And secondly, my soul, you gave it to me, and eventually you take it from me. So it's not all I have left to do is give it back to you in my life. Give it back to you. How? I'm going to think your thoughts, say your words. I will, in other words, it's not about me. It's about giving back to you that which is yours in any case, through the mitzvah. I'm giving myself over to you.